The Qidi Plus 4 has one killer feature everyone is going to copy. I'll honestly be surprised if we don't have this on the next generation printer from Bambu. It's not the extruder or the Hotend. It's not the larger bed or the heated chamber. It's the belts. They have a 1.5mm pitch, as opposed to the usual 2mm. That doesn't sound like a big difference, but you'll see shortly why this one seemingly insignificant change drastically improves print quality, making the quality of other modern printers look pretty pedestrian in comparison. But the Plus 4 isn't perfect. It's got a few pretty significant flaws that really limit its potential. Stick around, because we're going to be unpacking all of that and more. For your knowledge, Qidi sent this machine to me at no charge. If you purchase one using my link in the description, I'll receive a small commission. But no money changed hands, and the opinions expressed here are my own. As always, we'll be showing off the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Plus 4 is the successor to the X Plus 3. No X for this generation, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have the X factor. On the contrary, this appears to be a big step forward. At face value, the appearance of the Plus 4 is much more professional than any of Qidi's previous printers. The all-plastic enclosure has been upgraded. The front door is now glassed, as is the top lid. The shell is still plastic, but the paint job makes it look more like metal. The overall design is more angular and much more minimalistic. Besides the aesthetics, the Plus 4 has been improved in nearly every other way. It inherits many of the upgrades that were first introduced with the Q1 Pro, things like a filament tangle sensor, which has already come in handy, nozzle probing for automatic Z offset, a dual motor Z-axis allowing for bed tilt compensation, and a spring-loaded auto belt tensioning system, all things the X3 series didn't have. But it takes things a step further, with numerous improvements over the Q1. The bed is thicker, allowing it to stay flatter when heated. I measured a standard deviation of 0.24mm, as compared to 0.35 on the Q1. The motion system has been beefed up too, 9mm belts and 10mm rods, as opposed to 6 and 8. The printhead is similar in appearance, but the internals have been mostly redesigned, with a new hotend and cooling setup. The heatsink clearly takes inspiration from Bambu, while the nozzle and heat break adopt a one-piece design, similar to those found on Purge printers. The nozzle is bimetallic, with a copper alloy for better heat conduction and a hardened steel tip for wear resistance. The 80-watt ceramic heating element has a maximum temperature of 370 degrees, an increase of 20 over the 350 of the Q1 and X3 series. In my testing, it achieved a maximum flow rate of 21mm3 per second, slightly better than the 19 I measured with the stock hotend on the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. Part cooling is accomplished with the same 50-15 radial blower as on the Q1 and X3 series, but it has been relocated from the front faceplate to behind the nozzle. This makes it possible to fully remove the cover without wires hanging down, something I definitely appreciate. There's a Hall effect sensor in the printhead that is used for filament runout detection, and a newly added filament cutter, presumably incorporated for future compatibility with the Qidi box. Worth noting is that this is considerably higher above the top of the heatsink than the cutter on the Bambu Lab printers. This means that more purge volume will be required to fully flush the old color after a swap, leading to more waste and less efficient filament changes. With multi-material printing already being very wasteful, this seems like a big oversight in the design of this printer. But we'll have to wait and see how this plays out once the Qidi box becomes available. The extruder is mostly unchanged. The only difference I observed is the addition of a removable front piece, which makes it possible to clear extruder clogs without complete disassembly, a welcome improvement. It retains the same 8.9:1 dual-gear direct drive design, with oversized drive gears for increased contact area with the filament. The gears are hardened steel, which, together with the hardened steel nozzle, makes this printer compatible with abrasive filaments, like carbon fiber nylon or ABS glass fiber. Combine those with a heated chamber capable of 65 degrees, and the Plus 4 meets the criteria of an engineering-grade machine. This heater has seen a significant redesign from previous generations, with an extra 100 watts of power for a total of 400, and an integrated fan that helps circulate the warm air throughout the enclosure. The old heaters were also rated to 65 degrees, but in practice they never reached it. In my testing, the Plus 4 reached that temperature in 15 minutes. But my gosh, when this is heating for the first time, it stinks. It made ABS fumes smell like potpourri in comparison. Fortunately, the smell did dissipate after a while, but it was highly unpleasant in the meantime. I thought this was just off-gassing from the heater, but upon inspecting the electronics, some components showed evidence of burning. It turns out that there is an issue with the relay board that causes it to overheat, posing a potential fire hazard. Qidi is aware and is addressing it. For more information on the situation, Daniel from Modbot made a great video. Until this is resolved, I don't advise buying this printer for its heated chamber. The better heating performance is bolstered by the addition of insulation, foam panels on the inner walls of the enclosure, aiding in heat retention and sound dampening. The Plus 4 also adds a carbon filter to the exhaust fan, something the Q1 Pro doesn't have, so it's fully equipped to print ABS. The integrated touchscreen of the previous generation has been replaced with an external 5-inch display. The UI is basic, lacking any advanced configuration options, but it's easy to navigate. My only complaint is that the thumbnail previews for G-code are slow to load, detracting from the experience. You can also control the printer remotely through the Fluid Web interface, or through the Qidi Link app. When at home, the app offers no real benefit over just opening a web browser directly. However, when away, the app allows you to talk to the printer as if on your home network, without needing to configure a VPN. It connects through the cloud using your choice of server. A bit of a strange option to offer the end user, if you ask me. If you prefer, you can toggle into LAN-only mode to keep your printing offline, but you'll no longer be able to use the app, and firmware updates will require a USB stick. The Plus 4 runs the latest version of Klipper firmware, 0.12, an improvement over the outdated 0.10 that shipped with the Q1 Pro. You can view your ongoing prints in the web interface, using the built-in 1080p webcam. It's fine for viewing, but the quality isn't superb. It's definitely a step up from the Q1 Pro, however, with its improved wide-angle view, and a big step up from the X3 series with no cameras at all. So those are the main features of the Qidi Plus 4. Now let's get to printing. But first, a message from today's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay is a prototyping service provider. They specialize in PCB fabrication, custom electronics, machining, sheet metal fabrication, and much more. Essentially any service that you may need to turn your ideas into reality. With PCBWay's services, you can get parts machined from aluminum, laser cut from steel, or injection molded in polycarbonate. The prices are reasonable and the customer service reps are friendly and knowledgeable. So the next time you have a project that is outside your means, remember, PCBWay can help. Alright, back to the Plus 4. The spool holder has become progressively more convenient with each iteration. The rear-mounted dry box of the Max 3 was a real pain. The side-mounted spool holder of the Q1 was considerably better. Now we have a top-mounted spool holder, the most convenient of all. For filament loading, the printhead moves to a dedicated location, where the nozzle is wiped and the Purge filament is ejected out the back. This is a notable improvement over the system employed on the Q1 Pro, where the nozzle wiper is rickety and all of the waste is captured internally in a bucket that must be emptied periodically. With the filament loaded, we're almost ready to print. But first, we have to do some pre-flight calibrations, bed leveling, and input shaping. This was the first result for the bed mesh. A notable tilt in the x-axis. For some odd reason, the current firmware doesn't attempt to correct for this, despite advertising the dual Z motors as a selling feature. What's even stranger is the tutorial video they have on their wiki that shows using two equal height objects to force the motor positions to sync up. The more sensible thing to do would just be to send the Z-tilt adjust command in the web interface, and have the printer tram the bed automatically. This command is included by default as part of the bed leveling macro on the Q1 Pro. Why they removed it for the Plus 4 is anyone's guess. Input shaping was next, and these are the results. Looking first at the x-axis, we can see that the resonance response is a fair bit better than the X-Max 3 with its multiple peaks, but not quite as clean as the Q1 Pro with its single sharp peak. The maximum accelerations are 7,700, 7,800, and 10,900 respectively. The y-axis result was worse on the Plus 4 than either the Max 3 or the Q1 Pro, with a notable secondary resonance around 135 Hz. Qidi machines have always had chunky printheads, and this one is no different. The Plus 4 printhead has likely gained a few grams with the addition of the filament cut. More mass equals more inertia equals more vibrations. More vibrations means more aggressive input shaping required to damp them out. More aggressive input shaping means more smoothing of the details in your models. In order to limit the amount of smoothing, Klipper suggests a maximum acceleration beyond which the sharpness of details is compromised. Since a single global shaping function is used for both axes, you need to take the lower of the two values for x and y, in this case 6200. This is well below the 20,000 maximum acceleration advertised for this machine. But this isn't unique to the Plus 4 or other Qidi machines. This is the case with every printer I've tested. The marketing department says one thing, physics says another. In this case, the marketing department says 20,000. The slicer profiles say 10,000, and physics says 6200. At the end of the day, you need to decide what's more important to you, speed or sharpness of detail. Set the maximum acceleration accordingly, then go about your printing. I started out my testing with PLA. The pre-sliced benchy completed in 18 minutes and looked pretty darn good. The smoothing of details is definitely evident, but not awful. It's clear that some tuning of pressure advances are required, but overall, this was an impressive result. The Autodesk Kickstarter FDM benchmark test was next. It's been a while since I've gotten a perfect result on the tolerance test, but the Plus 4 delivered, outperforming the Bambu X1C and the FLSun S1, among others. A great score for overhangs and bridges too. No ringing in X or Y, and the spires of the fine feature flow control test printed fine too. Dimensionally, it measured a little undersized, so I decided to print a Califlower to confirm the accuracy. The Califlower had the opposite problem. It was slightly oversized, pretty much uniformly in X and Y. The discrepancy is most likely a result of material shrinkage or expansion, rather than any mechanical phenomena, so I'm not too concerned about it. If we're keeping score, it was a slightly better result than I obtained from the X1C, but honestly, we're splitting hairs at this point. Alright, enough with the benchmarks. Let's print something practical using PETG. My Purge printers are mounted high up on a shelf, with just barely enough clearance between the roof and the spool. So let's fix that. I found this spool holder model online and modified it to increase the angle so the spool sits lower. I printed one copy on my Purge Mark IV, one on the Qidi Plus 4, and one on the Q1 Pro. The results were frankly shocking. The Q1 Pro was the worst of the bunch, with significant VFAs and some other strange squiggles throughout. The Mark IV result was better, but there were still some artifacts visible and definite VFAs on the sidewalls. The Plus 4 print was considerably better than either of the other two, with very minimal VFAs. Remember at the beginning of the video how I mentioned the biggest asset of this printer being the belts? This is where that comes into play. The Plus 4 uses belts with a 1.5mm pitch, as opposed to the 2mm pitch most commonly used on 3D printers. The finer pitch allows for higher precision in positioning. The belt moves a shorter distance with each step of the motor. This is why the Plus 4 has significantly less pronounced vertical fine artifacts than any other printer. Unfortunately, this PETG spool holder was a little too flimsy, so I reprinted it in ABS-GF with a few extra perimeters. The chamber was set to 55 degrees for this print, and no warping was evident. The finished product felt strong and stiff. The fit was a bit snug, but it went on after some convincing. I then switched to PETCF and tried printing a few more. That's when things went sideways. I came back a little while later to a clogged nozzle. I had left the lid on for this print, which was clearly a mistake. The heat inside the enclosure had caused the filament to soften high up in the extrusion pad. But it wasn't just the nozzle that was clogged, the extruder was too. This brings us to another significant flaw with the Plus 4. The heatsink cooling fan is underpowered, and the flow is poorly directed. Members of the community have already taken to modding this, with the addition of a duct to direct the flow. To their credit, Qidi was quick to address the issue, creating a new nozzle design that supposedly has less risk of clogging. This has been a trend with Qidi printers. They have some issues when they're first released, but Qidi works behind the scenes to resolve them. This usually means that there's multiple versions of each printer with slight variations, like the X-Max 3 with multiple different versions of the toolhead, some with an inductive probe and others with a BL Touch, or the X Smart 3, which originally shipped with a filament cutter that was later removed. For this reason, it's usually a good idea to wait a few months after Qidi releases a new printer before jumping on it. If you're impatient and want to get your hands on the new toys right away, Qidi support is usually pretty good about giving you the new parts at no charge if you ask. I next tried printing some of the parts for my Santa Chimney Christmas Countdown design. The results here weren't as stellar. There were some strange artifacts that coincided with the overhangs, seemingly related to the slowdown that is enforced in the slicer and the subsequent acceleration. The overhang at the top of the mantle was also quite rough. I sliced this in QidiSlicer, which itself is quite nice. It's a port of PurgeSlicer, with some added features that are quite interesting, like the ability to send jobs to multiple printers simultaneously, which would be really convenient for print farms. The supplied profiles are okay, but could use some work. The PLA profile doesn't have the auxiliary part cooling fan enabled by default, so this is another thing that the Plus 4 is equipped with, but makes no use of with the default settings. For the second attempt at the fireplace, I turned the aux fan on in addition to reorienting the model. I sliced with Orca this time, and disabled the slowdown for overhangs, in addition to calibrating pressure advance prior to printing. The result was way better, even better than what I normally get from my X1 Carbon with similar settings. By the way, if you want to see how I designed this, I have a video about it on my channel. If you want to print it yourself, the file is available on my Patreon page or as a digital download from my web shop. So now you know what the Plus 4 is all about and what it's capable of. It's a notable improvement over Qidi's previous generation of machines. It looks better, it's more feature-rich, and it has better print quality. We'll have to wait and see how the integration is with the Qidi Box multi-material system when it's released early next year. If it's good, I think this will be a real contender to Bambu's current lineup. In the meantime, this is a very solid single material printer. The price, features, and performance make this one of the best value for money machines on the market right now, especially for those that are less interested in producing colorful trinkets and more interested in producing robust parts from engineering-grade materials. But I'd love to know what you think. Is the Plus 4 on your radar, or are you waiting to see what Bambu comes up with? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. My name's Taylor, this is YHK3D, and until next time, happy 3D printing.